To be silent. Sometimes it's really hard to do, huh? I don't know, I find it fascinating in my own life that the more anxious I find myself getting, why would I be anxious in our world right now? I don't know. But the more anxious I find myself getting, the harder it is for me to actually sit in the silence. And yet, those are the moments when I need to sit in the silence even more. And so it asks something of us. So in this book, The World Could Be Otherwise, Imagination and the Bodhisattva Path, we're on week 5. And if you are new to it, don't worry, I'm doing each chapter pretty much as a standalone. If you're interested in the previous perfections, as they're called, you can look on YouTube and check out my previous talks. But this perfection, so he is looking at how we can take our power of imagination and how we can bring it to these perfections, which are basically practices. We can practice generosity, we can practice ethical conduct, we can practice patience, we can practice joyful effort, which was last week, and this week we're looking at meditation. And how Norman Fisher is holding all of this is that the idea, which aligns with what unity, and remember, we're looking at this book as to how it intersects with unity's teachings, right? How does it live in a way that ties all of this together, all of this being whatever these spiritual truths are that we are attempting to become present and awake to. And he describes it this way: we are all bodhisattvas, called to practice compassion, devoted to be of benefit to others. And what I love about this is because, as I've said each week, and I'll say it each week, is that New Thought can get a little self-absorbed. We know it's an inside job, and so sometimes we can forget that we are not just invited to transform our inner understanding, but we are being invited to take that transformational energy and bring it so that it is being of benefit to others. And what Norman Fisher says, and what we know to be true, because this is really talking about being of service, is that when we show up in service to others, it's like the secret sauce. We're actually also showing up in service to ourselves. But it's through the act of giving away our love, our joy, our compassion that transformation happens. And I'm going to talk more about this next week when we get to the last chapter, which is about understanding, because I do want to be clear. When I ask you to throw away and be generous with your love, it does not mean we become doormats. It does not mean that we do not have clear boundaries about what is ours to give and what is ours to do. But those boundaries arise from a place of compassion rather than reactivity. Can you feel the difference? And we'll talk more about that next week. So meditation is this idea that we get to broaden our awareness. And paradoxically, the way we broaden our awareness is by focusing and concentration. And so for Norman Fisher, he talks about that meditation is about deepening and stabilizing our mind, heart, and actions. I love that. Could anybody in here use a little calm and stabilization right now? So this is what meditation does for us. And he says, as we narrow our focus to a single point, we paradoxically access a window to the expansive vastness of life. Now, how Myrtle would describe this is silence is a kind of stillness, a place of retreat into which we may enter, and having entered, may know the truth. Can you feel how we're in alignment here? And again, I keep saying this isn't a coincidence. This is because we're all pointing at the same thing. We're just coming at it from different angles, different perspectives, but we're all pointing at the same thing. And what we're being invited to do is not get so focused on the finger that's doing the pointing, but to focus on what it is that it's pointing towards. So there is something he calls the Buddhist tripod, right? And we need 3 legs. It's considered to be the most stable structure. But in order for that structure to be the most stable, every one of those legs has to be strong. Because if one of the legs isn't, then it's the most unstable structure. So in the Buddhist tripod, it's understanding, which we're going to talk about more next week, which is kind of the accumulation of all these perfections we've been talking about. It's meditation, and it's ethical conduct. This is our 5th principle. Can you feel how this is our 5th principle? We're talking about understanding, which is God is. Knowing that God is, understanding the qualities of God, understanding what God is, love, peace, harmony, grace. Meditation is how we know that we're not separate from it. And then ethical conduct is what we do from that awareness, right? God is, I am, I can. But we're holding it not in, I can do anything I want without thought of others. That's not what the I can is. The I can is, I can show up in service to the world, and in doing so, I am also in service to myself. So our 5th principle is we are the presence of God in action, understanding, meditation, ethical conduct. We act on these principles. Right? And this is straight from our website, prayer, meditation, and study assist our living and demonstrating God consciousness in the world. So can you feel how we're all talking about the same thing? And that when we bring these pieces together, we're creating a structure that we can stand on and lean into even when the world is turning us upside down. So he talks about several different types of meditation. So one of them is samatha, which is the calming or concentration meditation. And it's known, the idea is that concentration is the unification of the mind in the service of spiritual good. I loved that, right? We're not just unifying our mind, because let's pick an example that isn't loaded, but let's say an athlete. They may have great powers of concentration, but that's not the kind of concentration he's talking about. He's talking about concentration that is in service to spiritual growth. Can you feel the difference? The intentionality behind our concentration. And this type of meditation liberates us from self-focus and distractions, right? The stuff out there and the stuff that we think is so important right here. So the kinds of meditation that are part of this world of concentration meditation would be focusing on your bodily sensations, right? Following the breath. Right? That's all you're focused on, the breath, moving in or out. I remember I had a teacher once who was like, focus on where the breath exhales from your nostrils, right? That specific form of concentration. Perhaps it's a word or phrase. Right? We have a lot of chanting that people can do, which is also about giving us a point of focus. We have loving kindness, where we're consciously sharing our love with the world. We have joy. We did this last week, that we get to be the place that is joy, and that we get to, again, share that. Our focus is on sharing the joy with the people who are calling up in our awareness. We can do the same thing with compassion. We can do the same thing with equanimity. This equanimity has been my prayer for this country for like a month and a half now, right? Equanimity. And then we have Vipassana. Now, Vipassana is called insight meditation. And this is the idea that we are meditating so that we can have an insight that will liberate us from suffering. There's a purpose to it around gaining insight and clarity, because the Buddhist tradition believes that we have to awaken to the cause and nature of suffering if we're going to unhook ourselves from it. So insight meditation is designed so that we are actually opening ourselves up to insights about our existence. And the Buddhists break it down into 3 categories. We have impermanence, insights around impermanence. Things abide for a time, they alter, and they disappear. Do we all have a lot of problems with that? The non-self, that we too are not an abiding creature, right? That we think we are. We aren't stuck. We aren't the same. There is nothing, breathe into this, there is nothing about you that is fixed. But, I have the whole story about what my mother did to me, and that's fixed. I will always be challenged by that experience. What the Buddhists are anchoring for us is that we are as non-abiding as everything else is. And then suffering. Our suffering arises because, as I said in previous weeks, we fight with what is. We try to keep things solid. We try to fix them. We try to make them knowable. Now remember, I said last week, pain happens. That is part of our human existence. Pain, suffering, no, not suffering, pain, loss, hurt, grief. But that suffering itself, that part is actually optional. That arises from the framework that we hold everything from. And so insight meditation is inviting us to actually sit with that. Sit with the impermanence that is life itself. Sit with the fact that our identity, who it is that we think we are. You hear people say it all the time. Well, I'm a very strong person. Well, we can be very strong, but can we also be something else? Have we always been strong at every single absolutely moment in our life? We haven't necessarily felt it. So that's the impermanence, and we're being invited to actually be truly present to it. Because it's about being a divine human. We're talking about the same thing. Can you feel how we're talking about the same thing? Impermanence, all of those things are about the relative world. And meditation is a process that allows us to have insights about the limitations of the relative world, and that there's something more. So we're being invited to see and accept and integrate the impermanent nature of our human existence. And we are being invited to cultivate at the same time an understanding of our divine identity. God is, I am, I can. The whole point of this is so that we get to experience liberation, so we get to experience wholeness, so that we're not just here with me and my little problems and what I'm focused on and what I think is so important, but that we are here in service to everyone. So we're being invited to shift from me to all. And this is hard. Look at what's happening in the Middle East right now. It's so hard to not get sucked into the me, the sides, the identities, the rationalizations, the justifications, can you feel how that's all part of the relative realm? And what we're being invited to do is to be able to, it's not that we don't pay attention to or acknowledge that that is happening, but we're also being invited to anchor something greater than that. So he also talks about mindfulness. And it's interesting because he clarified something for me in his piece around mindfulness that I was really grateful for. So he talks about mindfulness as being aware with some clarity and calmness all the time, not just during our meditation practice. Mindfulness broadens our awareness. Concentration narrows our focus. And we need both. Can you feel how we need both? So we need the calm, stable understanding that concentration provides our mind and our heart in order to be able to show up with mindfulness. But mindfulness is all about being in the world. Mindfulness is not about sitting on our cushion. Mindfulness is how we show up in time and in space. So what mindfulness does is it prevents the part of us that wants to fixate and get rigid. Mindfulness is constantly forcing us to be flexible and adaptable and open and searching and expanding. So we want to be doing both of these things. But can you feel how they support each other? The more mindful you are about what you are actually doing in the world, the easier it is for you to sit in the stillness, and the more time you spend sitting in the stillness, the easier it is to bring mindfulness to what is happening all around you. So he calls this the insight that heals the world, because we're still in insight meditation, right? We're looking for the insights. And he says, meditation is a process of returning to our true self that knows there is no other. We are others. And then I added this part because I think it's important that it's through mindfulness that we bring this awareness into the world. And so if we look at it within the unity framework, this is a quote from Myrtle. And she says, "We have the mind of Christ, and it is for us to make conscious union in the silence with the all-providing mind, lifting our thoughts to its standard of truth and holding them in this truth as we go about our own particular duties of living." Can you feel how we're talking about the exact same thing? Holding that consciousness of truth that we can becomes accessible through our ability to concentrate. And then we get to take that understanding of truth, and we are being invited to bring it in to our duties of living, how we show up in the world. And through this process, we are creating an avenue of greater understanding. Again, we're going to get more into this next week, but a greater understanding of what is ours to do, really. Not because we feel guilted into it, not because we feel like we should, right? We say don't should on yourself. It's being able to be truly clear about what does it mean for me to be a compassionate being in time and in space. What does that actually look like? And I can guarantee that it doesn't look anything like how you're living right now. Because there's so much more there to explore. Remember, all of this is a journey of liberation. All of this is a journey of freedom, of empowerment. Not your small self-empowerment. I want this and I'm going to get this because I really want it. How often do we do that? How often do we say, it's this or nothing? We are being invited to bring mindfulness, which means that we get to be flexible, we get to shift, we get to adapt, we get to actually be present to what is right now. And can that be painful? Yes. But if we don't actually acknowledge what is right now, then all we're doing is a spiritual bypass. All we're doing is taking spiritual principles and slapping like a Band-Aid on top of a really large wound and saying, that's taken care of. And yet it still throbs, and it still hurts, and it still pulls our focus and our attention. Anybody in here relate to this? Well, Paul Hasselbeck says, don't take our spiritual principles and just slap them onto something that you're not willing to actually transform within yourself, because it's like putting beautiful icing on a moldy cake. So what stands in our way of all of this, right? Because it sounds fabulous. Like, why is this so hard? I don't understand. It sounds amazing. So the Buddhists have what they call the 5 hindrances. These are the things that we get stuck on. And the first 2 are the ones you probably have heard the most about. Attachment, right? And this is where we are so attached to things that it's almost obsessive. Obsessive thoughts, obsessive ideas. You're standing in the shower and that thought comes back and back and back again. Now it can range from, I want that, and we get obsessed with it. And it can also be about, I want them to, and become obsessed about it. How do I get them to do what I want them to do? How can I, right? And we're obsessed. Or how do I make them understand how painful what they said to me was? And we obsess and we obsess and we obsess about what we're going to say and how we're going to say it so that they will have some sort of fabulous insight about what a horrible human being they are. Because that's really what we're doing. Aversion, right? And aversion is where we're avoiding. So spiritual bypass is like the major aversion in our understanding and unity teachings. But when you feel yourself complaining, right? There was a whole thing at one point where you had the little things, and you're supposed to like snap your wrist every time you've heard yourself complaining, right? Complaining is aversion. When you're complaining, you're not an active participant in navigating what is. You're just complaining about it. You are avoiding being an active participant in navigating what is. And anytime you feel like, I just got to get away from this, I can't, I have to just leave, anytime we want to just exit stage left, we are in aversion. The flurry and worry, I loved that, right? Flurry and worry. So this is when I had this when I first tried to learn how to meditate. I could not sit still. My body was just jumping and jumping and twitching and moving and twitching and moving. Whew. And it was all an expression of this flurry and worry. As my body would twitch, my mind would twitch, everything would be sort of moving all over the place. Anybody ever feel that way? Your thoughts are just like ding, 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 and you're like, whoa. And then we find ourselves dredging up the oldest stuff. We're like, where did that come from? They did that to me 25 years ago. So all of that is flurry and worry, right? And then laziness. And remember, we talked about this last week. We're not talking about how much you do in your life, because we all know we do a lot. We're talking about spiritual laziness. We're talking about spiritual laziness, and that can manifest itself as being sleepy, being unmotivated. I don't want to read my book. I don't want to sit and meditate. A lack of interest in something, right? I've shared how when I first started going to Agape, I loved the environment there. I mean, I felt like I had stepped into this place that was like, oh, it was so loving and it was so beautiful and it was everything. And I loved the message. And Michael Beckwith would start talking and I would fall asleep. And then when he finished talking, I would wake up again. Happened for like 2.5 months. Every time he spoke, I fell asleep. Because I couldn't navigate what he was communicating. The frequency was like too much for my system. But I stayed. Can you feel the difference? I stayed in it. I literally said to myself, I know when I am sleeping that my consciousness is absorbing this in a way so that I will be able to stay awake. I made it part of my spiritual journey. So then, just because I was sleepy didn't mean I was being spiritually lazy. Does that make sense? Because again, I was dealing with what is. I wasn't trying to pretend that I wasn't falling asleep. I would actually say to the people next to me, if I fall asleep, don't worry, I'll wake up as soon as he's done talking. And then, of course, we have the doubt, right? What's the point? Why am I doing this? It never changes. No, the insights don't come. The concentration is horrible. I used to sit there for I couldn't even sit for 5 minutes, honestly, but the timer would be for 5 minutes. And my brain would be going in 500 million directions, and I'd be twitching, and I'd be, and I would say to myself, what is the point of this? And then I would say, no. I'm getting on the other side of whatever this is. I am not pretending anymore. This is what my mind does all the time. So this is the thing to remember, that when you do get quiet, whatever is going on in your consciousness while you're trying to sit, that is happening all the time. You just became quiet enough to actually hear it. But that is what is fueling you all the time. So that was an insight for me that wow, this is how I function. How do I function like this? This is crazy making. And it was through my willingness to be transformed that I just kept showing up and saying every day, I would sit down and I would go, today I'm actually going to be able to sit. And it took about 6 months, and I sat down and said, today I'm going to be able to sit. And I opened my eyes, and it was 90 minutes later. Took 6 months of what felt like torture. But then all of a sudden, something gave way. And I discovered something about myself. So the hindrances aren't something we want to make the evil boogeyman. The hindrances are the ways we get to look at it and say, oh, what is it? I'm attached to something. I'm obsessing about this. What am I attached to? What is it that I'm actually attached to right now? And can I unhook myself from that attachment? It becomes, when we notice the hindrances, it becomes a way to grow our practice. This isn't about beating ourselves up. Right? This isn't about what we do that's wrong. It's about how we pay attention and notice where our leading edge is and how we're being invited to go deeper. So Norman Fisher offers this. He talks about, what if your practice is a practice of imagination? Because I know we all can get all caught up in how do I do this and what am I supposed to be doing? And I got to limit my mind and I got to shape my mind and I got to be clear about my thoughts and I got to get these foreign words to just trip off my tongue and I got to do it right. And he's saying, what if instead about limiting and shaping our mind, what if it's about releasing the mind into imaginative spaciousness? Now, doesn't that sound like infinite possibility to you? So imagination, he makes a distinction between imagination and fantasy. He talks about imagination as being something that opens and frees us, and he talks about fantasy as being about reinforcing our smallness or only being about reinforcing our desire. Can you feel the difference there? Now, in Unity, we would call this the divine idea, the God idea, versus our human idea. And again, I will say this over and over again. Our human ideas are not bad, but they are so limited. They are so limited. What we are interested in cultivating is the God idea of our life, the divine idea of our life, the purpose that is ours and only ours to be and to do in this world, that resonates harmonically with the entire planet. That what I am here to be and to do is not for me. This is really important. If you walk away with nothing from this book study, but this thing that's sort of rattling around in your understanding, that what we do is not for ourselves. What we do is for the world. Amen. And it's hard work. And we said yes. If you're sitting here, if you're watching on the live stream, you said yes on some level, in some way, shape, or form. And even if you're sleeping through my talk right now, if you're watching, you're here. Right? You've said yes to the journey. So we have to begin to bring the insight. What is a fantasy? What is fantasy? And what is actually the divine idea? And I will tell you that the way I always know the difference is that my fantasies are always very detail specific. It's going to be a 4-bedroom house, and it's going to have a backyard. That is a human idea. When we are in divine ideas, it is about what is the perfect space for me to grow my roots, to feel supported, to have what I need to be able to show up in this world for the world. Can you feel the difference? Now, I may end up in a 4-bedroom. I may end up in a 1-bedroom. Do I say no to the 1-bedroom? I may end up in a fabulous community of people, and they're not in alignment with what it is that I'm here to be and do. Nobody's separate from us, but we need to bring consciousness, not the smallness of who we are, that thinks we know what's best, but we want to continually be opening ourselves up to that larger vision of who we each are, of what the world is, of what is possible, that spaciousness. That's what we're here to anchor for the world. We don't have to have all the answers. Our humanness wants to solve the problem. What if we allow our divinity to actually be the solution? Be it in time, in space. Even if we can't quite articulate what it is, we are being it. Can you feel the difference here? So let's just quick look at some of the meditative practice, because what we've been saying each week is that we're here to practice. So I am hoping that most of you have some sort of a practice. However, even if it's just once a week, if you come on Sunday morning and you do practice once on Sunday morning, guess what? That's a practice. Don't diminish what it is that you do accomplish. Don't set a human standard for what it is that you think it's supposed to be and dismiss and put yourself down, because that's doubt. Can you feel that? So that you're not actually staying on the course. So you can do deep belly breathing. Anybody in here have a long commute to work? Guess what? You can do this while you're driving. You can. You can breathe into your belly. You can get past the nervous system, the tension of the chest and the heart and the shallow breath, and you can allow yourself to focus on that deep belly breathing. You can do guided meditations. If you feel like, I don't know how to do any of this, anybody in here feel like that? Do some guided meditation. There are so many apps out there. Calm has some fabulous meditations. Loving kindness meditation. Just sit and send love. Just send love. I do that while I'm driving sometimes with everybody I'm on the road with. Right? Sending loving kindness to everyone who's on the road with me, particularly the ones that go zipping past me and swerving in and out. We did the Tonglen meditation, which was imagining yourself across from you, imagining someone else, taking in the pain and transforming it and sending back love and light. You can do a koan practice. If that works for you, some people need the mind to be engaged. So sit and think about what is the sound of one hand clapping, or, right? There are so many koans out there. Just sit with the paradoxical nature of it. There's no answer. You can do a walking meditation. This is me, right? Sitting still. I can sit still. Believe it or not, I can. But walking meditations are just so helpful for me. And so this is a main practice of what I do. Affirmations and affirmative prayer. Use the tools we have. God is, I am, I can. And then life visioning. We've done life visioning here. This idea that we're opening up to the larger vision of who we are and what we are, working through, letting go of our small idea, letting go of what we think the answer is, and listening to what we're being invited to become. And then we, of course, have the daily word, right? And Lectio Divina for those who come from that more Catholic background, where you can take a sacred text and just allow it to be with you. This is what I'm going to invite us all to practice for this week, because let me tell you, the stillness that you'll be invited into, as we keep ramping things up for the election, as we see what's growing in the Middle East, as we need to be a strong anchor of calm and stability in our hearts, in our minds, and in our actions. That is the power of the perfection of meditation. So let's take this into a time of meditation. I'm just going to invite everyone to take a deep breath. I know that might have been a lot of mind action for some of you. It might have been a lot of, sort of in the body energy. And so we're going to practice right now. We're going to allow ourselves the opportunity to be still. Choosing to quiet the mind. Opening the heart. Expanding our understanding of ourselves. We are so much larger than we think we are. And as we rest in this stillness, the invitation is to allow which is our true nature to make itself known. And for each one of us, that will be different. There's no right or wrong. It's like, what is that wellspring of love and light? What is that blueprint of wholeness? What is that energy of joy and compassion? And as you rest in this space, I invite you to just place your focus there. Focus on love. Focus on peace. Notice how you might want to move away and just lovingly call yourself back. Maybe there's a mantra or a phrase. For me, what I'm hearing right now is there is only love. And when I feel myself pull away, I say there's only love. And the invitation right now is just, we're going to rest here in this magnificent silence together. Focusing, concentrating gently and lovingly on our true nature and our true name. Let's take a few minutes in the silence. And we just lovingly notice where our attention is. And if we need to call ourselves back to love, we do so with compassion, gentleness, and just enveloping ourselves in that love. And I want you to extend that outward and send that love to each person here. Feeling the interconnectedness that is the one power and the one present. Heart to heart, hand to hand, soul to soul. Through time and through space. Enveloping this entire planet in that spacious possibility. Knowing that as we practice, what we are practicing practices us, and we grow. We grow in our spiritual capacity. This is what will create a world that truly works for everyone. This surety, this groundedness, this calm, stable space for our heart, our mind, and our action. And gratitude for all of it, all of it. I do give thanks. And in agreement, I invite you to know with me. And so it is. Amen. Ashe.